Well, hello everyone. I hope you are doing well. I expect that this video is going to get viewers that are really not my typical viewers. I am normally a political commentary channel, and history, by the way. So while I do commentary, it's normally on very political figures, but that is not the extent of my YouTube watching or my YouTube interest. I have a very wide variety of interests, and some of those are dealing with commentary just on the YouTube community itself, certain influencers within the community, and other personalities. A while back, I used to do several videos. I did quite a few videos on Jimmy Snow, and one of his favorite targets were these ultra-Christian women named Girl Defined, or at least their channel was named Girl Defined. And I've been kind of interested in them ever since, just because it is some of the background that I come from. I wasn't raised that way, but I did get sucked into a very fundamentalist form of Christianity that had that whole purity culture vibe. So while I didn't agree with them, I certainly understood where they were coming from and was just very interested in the entire topic. So I do watch a lot, and one of the channels I watch is the commentator. I'm going to be somewhat critiquing this video, and I know this will not make me popular amongst the general commentary community, because the channel that is somewhat, and I'm going to keep qualifying this somewhat in a moment, but that is somewhat the topic of this show, is Cruel World, Happy Mind. The hostess of the show is Madison, and I'll just refer to her from Madison from now on instead of the channel name. If you watch any of Madison's commentary, she is super, super sweet, very beautiful, seems very kind. So that's not really somebody that people in general like to be the target of a critique, but all of us are open to critique, aren't we? Now, I started watching Madison way before she has the level of polish that she has now. I think she even called them the Blue Kitchen days, and I really loved those videos. They were quite charming. So, just some things to get out there. Some people might go, wow, is there a little bit of catfight jealousy here? Oh, maybe in a tiny bit. Her success is certainly something to be both proud of and happy for her of, but also as a YouTube channel to be a little jealous of. It appears that she has staff now. She has if she's doing this herself, oh my goodness, kudos. But I believe she probably has staff that's doing video editing for her. And whoever that is, their style, at least I think, is amazing. And also whoever is doing her graphic artistry, so the thumbnails for her videos. Though I do think they're a bit sensationalistic, and that is going to be part of this critique. I'm also going to stay right up front. I get suspicious when there's too much of that super sweet. The world isn't super sweet, and a lot of it has a big tinge of a type of wokeism that I just don't care for, like overly virtue signaling. And those of you who are my typical audience knows I don't care for that at all, and it makes me very suspicious. Now, I am pre-recording this rather than doing it live. I'm normally a live streamer because there are a lot of clips. And I've got notes, and anyone who watches me also knows that's not typical. I normally just shoot from the hip, but I do have notes because there are things that are very concerning here for me. I'm trying to get these notes to stand up. Now I'm going to qualify that somewhat. Even though Madison's video is what I'm using to frame what I'm going to talk about, and I'm definitely going to have critiques about her documentary on Girl Defined. It goes broader on that. I've noticed a trend in these independent internet personalities that are doing documentaries. And I picked up that pronunciation. I know that's probably going to bug people because my own pronunciation bugs me, but I picked that up from Stephanie Harlow, and now and that's a true crime channel I really like, and now I just can't stop using that pronunciation. Sorry if it's annoying you, but it's what I call the peril of internet document. Now I'm going back to the way I said it before. I'll probably go back and forth. Documentaries or documentaries, however you want to say it, where everyone is trying to outdo each other and make it more sensationalistic. And what is carrying a lot of the weight isn't the content, it's the editing. It's the slick video editing. As I said, Madison has a very talented video editor, rather than necessarily a strict adherence to facts. So I'm going to go to my notes here. So what I had said, and I'm going to ad-lib from here as I do, because notes is probably generous. It's more of an outline. So I said the idea that documentaries are skewed, that's nothing new. If you watch Making a Murderer and then Candace Owens' refutation of that, you're just like, wow. And I was a person who was completely sold on the Undisclosed podcast of Adnan Syed's innocence, and then watched a bunch of YouTube presentations that gave the other side of the case. And I feel like my mind just had non-consensual intercourse. So don't trust everything you see. Examine it very, very critically, because Undisclosed really did a number on me. So, and Serial and Undisclosed. Sorry, I'm going back to my notes here because I did all of a sudden go off script. So, while not unheard of, that these super skewed ones. I mean, think of Michael Moore's documentaries. They are as skewed as they got. They also, I don't think, used to be so personality driven. Michael Moore being an exception, where there might have been a definite point of view. This phenomena of these exposés or commentaries on other people being so driven by personality, to me, it seems new. And it's very suited to the YouTube paradigm, and I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. And this happens even when there's not necessarily a parasocial relationship going on with the personality. It's just still so personality driven. But when you're dealing with a YouTuber whose exclusive content is these type of expose documentaries, and they're super, super sweet and beautiful, it is very easy to gain a parasocial relationship that numbs you to looking at things very critically. So as I said, enter the YouTube personality whose, again, bread and butter is expose type documentaries. And I think it is a recipe, or at least fraught with peril, even if the intent is really, really well-meaning. The pressure to produce very rapid interest, read scandal, pointing out faults of others at such a high volume, it's not healthy. And in that respect, I'm going to say, even though I don't agree with her all the time, ContraPoints, I think, does it the right way. There will be 6 months in between a ContraPoints video. It isn't every few weeks. So even though I don't think ContraPoints always gets it right, you have that very slick production, but you also have a maturity of time to develop a subject matter that isn't happening with some of these other channels. And when you couple this, again, with the inherent likability of the host or hostess and this need to put one's virtue on display, you start to run into some problems. And I think that is really what you see in this girl-defined expose that Madison did. Now, I talked about Madison's thumbnails on how I thought they were overly dramatic and manipulative. Here's the thumbnail for this show. But now let's scroll through Madison's YouTube, and you can see after a certain time, they're all this style. So stylistically, yes, it is cool for a YouTuber to have, you know, a certain thumbnail style that when somebody sees it, they know their videos. But look at these titles. And so many of them are repetitive. The end. You know, it's overly dramatic and emotionally manipulative. Sorry, Madison, that's the way I feel. Now, Madison's not the only creator I've noticed this with, so this is why I felt it was time to discuss. Finally, after seeing that girl-defined expose, and I did put some comments on her video saying that I thought she was being extremely uncharitable in some areas, though certainly not in others, because there is a lot to critique about girl-defined. And taking some really borderline libelous leaps. And now, once again, all the appropriate disclaimers, which I'm sure people of bad faith or people who choose to do so will promptly ignore. And I've got them written down so I will not forget anything. I generally like Madison's channel. And please consider this more of a critique of the genre, but a soft critique of her particular video. And I also generally dislike Girl Defined, the subject. But something I'm known for is making sure people I disagree with or dislike, I try to bend over backwards to be fair to them and make sure that the criticisms that are given can actually stick. Though I do have to say my dislike of Girl Defined is really tempered by pity, which we'll get into a bit here, as Madison's point of view is very tempered by pity as well. And it's also tempered by an attempt to understand them, having been, at least for a little while, in the type of world that they were raised in. And what is that? To give you the background as we start going into some clips, they are typical, traditional, strict evangelicals and part of an extreme purity movement. Think of the purity balls, that sort of thing, which definitely has its problems, to put it mildly. But in the Christian world, it's not freakishly unusual, as it's treated a bit in Madison's video, no matter what one's opinion is of it. And it's not isolated to Christianity. This just isn't freakishly unusual in conservative religious communities. You don't need to particularly demonize these girls and their family in order to criticize the particular point of view. And though that's not what Madison does exclusively, she does do it in a very unhealthy dollop. So my purpose in this video really isn't to critique Girl Defined, though it'll get into it a little bit, and it really isn't even to critique Madison, though certainly it will get into that a little bit. It's to highlight the manipulative and skewed tactics through production and personality that is just becoming so dominant in YouTube today. If someone were to do, excuse me, a really in-depth critique deep dive of Madison, she would not want to be treated the way she treated Girl Defined. Okay, clip number 1, and just let you know, these clips may seem somewhat disjointed because, again, just think back on what I said was the purpose, but I'll try to tie them all together. All right, let's roll that beautiful bean footage.
And sometimes Disney has a gay scene, which Bethany and Kristen, the women behind Girl Defined, have made it clear they do not like. I was sitting outside working on a writing project when I first got the news. I clicked on the link and it took me to an article titled Beauty and the Beast to feature first exclusively gay moment in a Disney movie. My thought was, oh no, you've got to be kidding me. But my next thought was, what else would I expect? How could Disney put a gay scene in a Christian movie? Why are they shoving their agenda down our throats? Disney is flying off the rails. What else did we expect?
Now note, this clip comes right from the beginning of Madison's show. Does it seem a little out of left field? Now, it's probably hard for you to say unless you watch her whole show, and it is in the show notes, so you'll be able to go watch the whole thing. But even without it being yanked out by me, it is completely out of left field. It's just smooshed into the intro like this, what was just said, is the most shocking thing ever. But the thing is, it's pretty standard conservative Christianity. I might not agree, you might not agree, but it's not like, oh my God, it really isn't. I'm sorry if you haven't been exposed to conservative Christianity, but this is just pretty typical. It's just not shocking that fundamentalist Christians are opposed to homosexuality. And this isn't some big, like, oh my God, secret for Girl Defined. What will you tell me next? Water is wet? Now, to be clear, this isn't my view, but shock and awe to what's just a pretty basic conservative Christian, Muslim, and Jewish point of view, what's the point? Is it just virtue signaling to your particular audience to prejudice them right off the bat without an attempt to understand or at least explain? And one thing I did want to add before we got into the clips is this is called a deep dive by Madison. And Girl Defined grew up, not from little kids, but from very young women to adulthood through their channel. That type of really super scrutiny might be appropriate for some people, but really for a couple of young girls growing up, is it really? They weren't some kind of super prominent power brokers. Did her video, what is it? It's nearly 2 hours long. It might even be more than 2 hours. I'll take a look at that. It's super, super long. Did you have to get so tedious just on these girls? Or was it for the clicks and not really the issues? Okay, well, let's go on to the next clip.
Many people know Bethany and Kristen, the women behind Girl Defined.
Hey everyone, I'm Kristen. And I'm Bethany. And we are going to sit on this bench in the rain. Hey! I don't know what I'm saying.
But what if there was a more dark and evil story behind the start of the Girl Defined platform and the Girl Defined fundamentalist family tree?
I do think parts of fundamentalism can be very dark. But this overly dramatic, it's dark and evil. And maybe you won't agree with me that this is over the top until you start to see some of the examples. And it's the specific examples that I think are borderline libel that made me want to discuss this. And you'll see why I'm pointing this clip out. So let's move on to another one.
While we all have been laughing at the women who say, honestly, cringeworthy things on the internet,
we need to be careful to not use our beauty in a way that selfishly causes people to give us attention and glorify us rather than glorifying our creator.
Honestly, I really do desire to get married. I've learned to really, every day, not to look ahead and go, oh my goodness, I'm probably gonna be 100 years old, just sitting in a rocking chair all by myself. Yeah. Just this withered old woman that's just miserable.
Now, cringe, yeah, there's cringier stuff though, and again, most of that's just typical fundamentalist Christian. And these are young girls. It's actually, I mean, you might call it cringe, some might call it cute. And I know it might seem foreign to those of you who weren't grown up in this, but the idea of using your beauty to selfishly do X, Y, and Z, well, you don't think that, put aside the religious thing that you want to use your beauty to glorify God rather than yourself. You don't think there's an issue with women manipulating people by using their beauty? I think there might be a little of that manipulation going on in this critique, but on Madison's end.
And who've been selling courses on how to be the best God-honoring, sensual Christian girl.
We are so excited to announce the launch of our fall online mentoring course. Our passion from the beginning has been to help young women understand God's design for womanhood.
True beauty really is the farthest thing from hot looks and sensual poses. True beauty really is found in a girl who loves Jesus and is striving to reflect him through her life.
How to be pure and perfect, and yet simultaneously how to have sex as a Christian and how to get rich as a Christian.
We put it in our book, Sex, Purity, and the Longings of a Girl's Heart. Another great book to read if you're dating or engaged or even married. This book is a must.
Now, again, yeah, selling courses that has like a bit of an well, and again, what was like so wrong with any of that? So they have a passion, they have an interest, and they're finding a way to capitalistically make money on that. Now, maybe it's just the hardcore libertarian in me, but I don't have a problem with that. Shaming them for using what they believe are their gifts and talents to make money and believe that they are helping people, because I do believe that they believe that. What is wrong with that? Aren't you doing that with your monetized channel, Madison? What gives you... This is going to become relevant later, so I know this is going to sound like really catty, bitchy stuff, but it will become relevant later. What makes you an authority on being able to critique the lives of other people and create documentaries? I don't know, maybe you do have a degree in filmmaking, but like degrees and credentials seem to be so important to you. Well, I actually value other things, and I think you can self-teach yourself things. A lot of credentials today are absolutely worthless, but the way you started this out is how they want to teach you to be a sensual Christian. That is a lie. That is not, in fact, again, I am willing to be corrected where you can find some quote from them, but in this particular clip, they actually said, you know, being a fulfilled Christian, and Christians do have sex, they are not going to be denying that, but it seems like you're kind of say that the purity culture means that you're not interested in that, but they're confining that interest to within the bounds of marriage. I just don't see where your critique is here, unless you're like, you know, they're being a bit exploitative with the way they're constantly trying to sell these courses. Okay, I'll give you that, but not to the extent that you say. And something else we'll start to know, I don't know whether it will be in these clips, but if you watch the show, I know some people will say this is because of YouTube. But then again, if we're starting to talk about compromising your values or behaving in a certain way just to make money, well, I can say that censoring yourself from saying the word sex and bleeping it out, and we're going to see something else that is super cringe, it gets bleeped out, or just like, it's like baby talk. It's super annoying throughout this whole video. I don't know about you. Maybe it's just because I'm a tiny channel and you're not. I don't get demonetized for using normal adult words. Yes, there are some things you can't say. You have to use phrases like unaliving, which, okay, yeah, that's a bit cringe to fall within the YouTube guidelines, but you really go over the top, Madison, in this video. So, I mean, you're doing things to make money as well that can seem pretty cringe. I feel infantilized sometimes with the language and the way you approach topics. And again, maybe you're doing it because you think YouTube is requiring you to. That hasn't been my experience, but maybe it's because I'm a tiny channel who just... And when I think I might have crossed the line, I'd rather hit monetization no than talk to my audience like they're babies.
If you're new here and you like obnoxious cats...
She literally blurred out her cat's butthole. Can't. I just can't. I don't believe YouTube requires that. Why would you blur out your cat's booty hole?
And began to spiral into seemingly greed and lust.
That word seemingly is carrying a lot of weight, as we'll see. And it's the worst possible characterization. Wanting to make a living at what you love is not greed. It can cross into that, and we'll see if it does. And I think it does a tiny bit. But they haven't been destroyed by greed and lust, is what she says. And lust, Bethany just wants a fulfilling marriage. That's not lust. That's normal.
I'm not being overdramatic when I say that I'd rather sit on a hot grill and wear something off the rack.
How I managed a $40,000 course launch this year while being a full-time stay-at-home mom.
Both Bethany and Kristen played by the perfect handbook. They saved themselves for marriage, practiced purity culture, and yet seemingly after they got married and started a family of their own, they weren't satisfied. Kristen posting about how unhappy she was even after adopting children, and Bethany spiraling into greed, asking her followers for gifts and constantly posting about different courses.
Yeah, the constant posting of things that are for profit can be cringe and can go over the line into grift. Maybe it's just me, because I've posted things that are off my Amazon list that there are some of my supporters that have gotten me tech equipment for my studio and things like that. I don't believe I've ever taken advantage of them. I know the people that have sent me gifts. I know that they can afford it and believe that it's their way to give back to having a very public libertarian voice in a way that they're just not suited to do or aren't in a position to do at that time. But again, I also don't have a problem with these girls having a business. And again, they're growing up before our eyes. This just seems unseemly to be this micro picky. And there's things to be picky about, and some of those will come up. But to draw this out into a couple hours is just crazy. And this video is probably going to be a couple hours about her couple hours video. I do see the irony.
Most of y'all know that we come from a really big family, but some of you might not know that there are actually 8 kids in our family.
The oldest sibling is Michael, then Kristen, then Bethany, Stephen, Alyssa, Timothy, Rebecca, and Susanna being the youngest.
Okay, let these pictures go by for a reason. These will become relevant later. Beautiful family. And again, they come from that very family-oriented, big family-oriented, purity culture type of Christianity. Having a big family is not unusual. Actually, this is probably on the smaller side of a big family, because their family has gotten into some of that much darker and more dangerous, like 20 kids and counting type, Bill Gothard type teaching. I don't know if I clipped out any of that, but Madison does get into that, and there is some really dark stuff that goes on in that movement. There's a lot of YouTube shows about that if you're interested. I'd recommend you check that out, and the ones about the Quiverful movement.
Their grandpa was a Nazi mayor. He's got a Wikipedia page about him and everything. Remember that next time you think Girl Defined is wholesome.
As people found out that Girl Defined has ties to the Nazi Nazis. Girl Define's great-grandfather, Hans, I'm gonna pronounce this wrong, Grosslicher, was a member of the NSDAP and was the Nazi mayor Saalfelden, Austria.
See the weird bleeping out? It just drives me crazy. We cannot control who our ancestors are. And again, there is something really weird that they do with this that will be probably in a later clip. But you know, knowing that you have that in your past family can be a bit traumatic. More than a bit traumatic. And the way any of us would handle that, we don't know. But to say that these children who weren't alive during that period of time, nor had anything to do with it, have ties to Nazism in some way is beyond a stretch. Beyond a stretch. And to have, and I can't remember the name of, it's Fundy Fridays is the gal, the hostess. She does that show, that the gal that was in the beginning, who also has pink hair. But to say, next time you think they're pure, remember they had a Nazi uncle. What does that have to do with them being pure? How is that fair? If I go back in your past and find out that you had slaveholders as ancestors, does that make you, I don't know, maybe you would think that made you not pure. I don't know. It seems to follow logically.
Bethany posed proudly with the captions, "With family that lived in Austria, we were directly impacted by the war. I have a special interest in learning about what they went through." Johann Grosslicher likely oversaw sending Saalfelden's Jewish community to...
And that's the weird part. Yeah. Bethany messed up big there. Like, you don't post about an ancestor that might, and I am going to emphasize might, because you notice in Madison's statement, likely carried a lot of weight. We don't know that. We don't know that. But let's assume that's true. I don't think it's an unsafe bet. Yeah. I don't think there's anything weird about going to Austria on your honeymoon. I also don't think there's anything weird about visiting historical family areas, even if your ancestors might have done terrible things. But to post about it in such a sanitized way and to share that with the world without sharing any kind of angst about what might have happened, yeah, that's weird. That's definitely worthy of criticism. But it could have just been tone deafness. But she's gonna start to now really insinuate that Girl Defined and their family are white supremacists. And there's no proof, you'll see.
Once World War II ended, he was removed as mayor in 1945. Alongside one of the posts, Bethany wrote about the sobering time she spent at the World War II sites, especially with family that lived in Austria at the time. At the time of it. So they were, you chose to go visit your Nazi relatives during your honeymoon and take pictures of it all, document it all for your Instagram? Bethany wrote, "Another wonderful day in Austria. We had the opportunity to visit some World War II sites." Now, of course, it's important to mention Bethany and the rest of her family could have been unaware of their ties to the Nazis. I feel like if that's the case, they just are very ignorant and unaware.
Again, the post was weird. I don't think it's weird to visit there. I don't think it's weird to call it sobering, because it certainly is sobering whether or not your relatives were potentially involved or not. Being interested in history, no, nothing weird about that. Posting it for your Instagram followers, yes, that's extremely tone deaf and weird. Or to channel Rachel Ziegler, weird.
Like, this is one of those cases where it's very easy to connect the dots here on your own. But their own mother, Heidi Baird, still holds their great-grandfather in very high regards. Clearly, one of Heidi's sons was nicknamed after their great-grandfather with the name Hans. And she even made an Instagram post comparing one of her granddaughters, it looks like, to her grandfather, saying the granddaughter's name. You were born on your great-great-opa's birthday. Oh, he would have loved to have known you, sweet girl. Hans, born July 12th, 1896. Granddaughter, born July 12th, 2018. 122 years apart.
Yeah, that's a bit weird. I do think it shows some weirdness with the mother. The mother becomes a central figure in this, though I think she is demonized way beyond the proof that is available. I certainly don't think it's appropriate to connect some newborn girl with, like, you know, some respect or reverence that you might have for an ancestor that might have been involved in bad things. But they are still your ancestor. And there is family trauma that goes on with that sort of thing. If you've ever watched any of the shows of people who are descendants of people that did bad things, like their father was mass murderers, and the conflicting emotions they go through, or parents whose children ended up doing terrible things, where on one hand, I mean, that's still your family, but on the other hand, they are monsters. It gets difficult and entangling, but yeah, Madison has points here, but I don't think those points lead to a conclusion that they are white supremacists.
What would a Nazi war criminal loved to have known about a baby born 122 years apart? That's what I would love to know. So a lot of people wonder if the Bairds, or at least some of them, I'm looking at you, Heidi, knew of their Nazi ancestry and past. With the amount of times they seem to talk about purity.
Purity, pureness.
Keeping yourself pure, and with the general racism exhibited in the family. I don't know.
Well, she didn't say. That isn't what she said. It was just that this ancestor would have loved to have known that there was a baby born on the same day. This was more joyous post about a baby. I don't know. To me, now this is starting to get stretched. And I didn't go look up the Wikipedia article. I don't care to learn about somebody's Nazi ancestors. But in an earlier clip, she said that he was likely to have done things, and now definitely calling him a Nazi war criminal. Was he tried in Nuremberg? I don't know. Maybe he was. That didn't come up in here. It seems like all of a sudden the definition got shifted. But what does what happened 100 years ago have direct bearing on what happened today, unless you are doing that virtue signaling thing where you have to walk around condemning everything about your past? And no doubt, if this man participated in those awful things, that is evil, that is monstrous. But it's still your ancestor, and you've got to grapple with that in some way. And it seems like maybe the more charitable reading is that they're grappling with it in a really weird way, and maybe this isn't something that should be paraded out before the public to make money on in a YouTube video, to put down these girls who had nothing to do with that. Again, I am getting very weird vibes from that mother's post, but the mother's not the daughters. And is this an expose about the mother?
Can confirm. I remember the first time I laid eyes on the Baird family at a wedding. They walked in so blonde, tall, slim. The entire family, blonde, white, tall.
Purity.
Okay, this is fucking gross, Madison. I see where you're going with this and you're going to make it explicit. What? Why don't you just come out and just say that they're Aryan breeders? Because that's what you're getting at, isn't it? And the reason why I showed those pictures earlier, they're not all blonde. And you could even see in that picture, you kind of went by, some of them are more brown haired. Now, certainly these two girls are very blonde. Certainly the majority of the family is very blonde. Is that a crime now? Do you need to make sure, if you happen to have somebody who might be a very, very bad person involved with the Nazis in your past, that you get rid of you make sure your skin gets darker and your hair gets less blonde? This is bad. This is really bad. This is gross. And maybe I'm super sensitive to this because I had a best friend, and when I say had, it's not like we're not friends, I just moved away, who had the blondest blue-eyed family I've ever seen, and the furthest thing you'd ever suspect of any kind of like white supremacist, but I don't know what their ancestry is. But my goodness, talk about judging people based upon their looks. How dare they be so white and blonde? And they're not all blonde, by the way. Oh, and the tying to pure, as if you don't know it's talking about sexual purity and you're trying to insinuate it's about bloodlines. Gross, Madison. Really, you ought to be ashamed of yourself for that.
The Baird Mershon family grew up as an upper middle class family, with the father working as an attorney. They also had a family cleaning business called the White Glove Maid Service. Okay.
You do realize that white glove is like a term in the cleaning industry, that you get something so dust-free that you can wipe it with a white glove and the glove stays clean. And this insinuation that you're making, that this name somehow is some kind of direct line of tie to white supremacy, shame on you. Seriously.
All of the children were homeschooled and very sheltered.
I said what I said.
None of the girls were allowed to go to college, and often when any opportunities were presented to them, they turned them down to keep staying at home.
We look to our talents and we say, wow, if I can achieve this certain like status in people's eyes of having a great enough talent, then I will be successful, then I will be worth something. But that's hard because we're not always going to achieve those things perfectly. I was a basketball player and I think I was pretty good.
Our verse for today goes right along with our topic, which is submitting to your parents' authority, and that's Colossians 3:20.
It takes a strong girl to respect her parents, even when she feels like they're being totally unreasonable.
And the family became more and more sheltered with more and more extreme beliefs. The matriarch of the family, Heidi Baird, not only posts about her Nazi grandparent, but is a Christian influencer of her own right, with her own website and Instagram. Heidi Baird's About Me on her website reads, "Married 4 years to my love Mike, who I share 9 beautiful children and 8 grandchildren, now 9 together. We own our own business. We homeschooled all our children from kinder through high school. We love Jesus and the truth of God's word, my passion. For the last 25 years, I've had the greatest privilege of coaching women through the rough seasons of life. Nothing brings me greater joy than guiding these precious women into an unhindered, freeing, and intimate relationship with Jesus," which of course you'll find is the entire purpose of Girl Defined as well. Was Bethany and Kristen inspired by their mother, or were they taught that this was the way, maybe the only way, for women to be brought up? According to one sibling who's come forward recently, Heidi is not necessarily the bright, happy, perfect person that she portrays online. In fact, this sibling has spoken out recently saying that she is a narcissist who you could never have an honest conversation with, who had an end motive with everything she did.
And I do somewhat feel sorry for the girls here. It does seem that their upbringing caused them to deny certain opportunities that I think they really wanted to take, particularly Bethany with basketball. She was apparently a very talented basketball player and loved it. But the shade upon homeschooling, just this side-eye shade, kiss my ass. Government indoctrination camps are not always what's best. Now, you might not like what they were raised with, but that is the right of parents. Now, this is my libertarian side coming through, but they weren't raised in the way you approve of. How dare they? If I had kids, which I don't, just to be clear, I do not have kids, I would have probably raised them in an entirely different way than that, but in a way you didn't approve of either. And I don't give a flying fuck. And she notes that the passion of the mother became the passion of the daughters. That is just typical, not just in Christian families, and a lot of families. Following in the footsteps of your parents, which kind of puts a little bit of paid to her claim that the girls are completely unqualified to do this. If they were raised in that environment, that's a bit of education on its own. And Madison does go into some family strife, and if it's correct, some really horrific family strife's not even the right word, some horrific experiences that one of the sons went through. I'm not going to be getting into that at all. I don't know if it's true, and I don't feel comfortable airing that just as a point of tea, as a point of drama, as a way to monetize a video. Him and his family need to work that out as best they can. I'm not shaming the son for coming forward. It's certainly his story to tell. It's just not one that I feel comfortable commenting on. There's definitely issues between the son and the mother. What's funny is the way the father is absolved from everything, at least in this commentary. If this is a typical fundamentalist Christian home, while the mother may have wielded power in a more subtle way, the father would have been a prominent figure in their lives. And in this whole situation, he's noticeably absent from these commentaries. There is no indication that, and if we're dealing with a typical fundamentalist family, again, where's the father here? I think the father would have to approve, and that was just a sly insinuation that you just made, Madison, because she made a very weird post, just dealing in a very weird way about an ancestor and the fact that she had ancestors that most likely did not like black people, that Heidi therefore is a racist and therefore would not have allowed any of her daughters to marry a black person. Did you strain yourself with that stretch? Now again, all of that might be true, but if you're going to insinuate and come damn close to outright stating it, you need more proof than you've presented here.
Bethany and Kristen rebranded as Girl Defined. It's important to note throughout this video, since you'll be presented with a lot of the messaging of what Bethany and Kristen think young girls should be defined as, and should look like, act like, think like, talk like, that Kristen and Bethany have no formal certifications, not only regarding psychology and mental health, or anything regarding mentoring, teaching, and coaching to help young people find their identity. But on top of that, it even seems that Kristen and Bethany have no formal Bible training, apart from just attending church and identifying as a Christian.
Okay. And this is the type of snobbishness I don't like. I'm not the one to completely put down any kinds of credentials, but I don't think you have to have credentials to teach other people. And you certainly don't have to have Bible credentials. And I say that as somebody, Madison, who is self-taught in the Bible, proceed to put me down, but wrote a biblical commentary that was accepted as required coursework I don't know if it still is, it was at one time, and an eschatology course at an accredited Christian university. I was a guest lecturer at a comparative religion course at Appalachian State University. I don't have any kind of formal Bible training. I taught myself, and most pastors were amazed. This type of academic elitism, where is your Bible qualifications, Madison, in order to provide these kinds of critiques upon Christians that later on you're going to say aren't very good Christians? Where is your documentary filmmaking degree? Where is your journalism degree? Where is your analysis degree on how these poor girls may have been brainwashed by their parents? What are your qualifications, Madison? Now, to be clear, I don't think you need any. I think you need a brain and be intelligent, which you certainly seem to have both, and just be able to explain things to people. But you're putting these girls down for things that could easily be said about you, I believe. I don't know all of your background because it's not important to me, and I think that'd be kind of creepy to go investigating you. But what? I became very familiar with Madison when she was doing anti-MLM, which is multi-level marketing content. What's her qualifications to do that? Her videos were really good. They seemed to check out.
Defined has been called out numerous times for gatekeeping Christianity. During the 2019 Girl Defined conference, Bethany and Kristen publicly tore apart another Christian YouTuber by the name of God is Gray, just because God is Gray has a different interpretation of the Bible.
That phrase, gatekeeping, is so overused. I'm not going to get into differentiating between one Christian and another. I enjoy the God is Gray channel. She's also a very, very sweet person. But Christianity is in fact something, and there is a line at which it is no longer Christianity, and you can't do this postmodern, oh my goodness, you're just such a terrible person, if you say, oh, because someone says it, we're going to give an extreme example here, that you literally worship the devil and don't believe that Jesus is the Savior, that you're not a Christian, you're gatekeeping. Now, if that's not gatekeeping, then that's obviously extreme, obviously not a Christian, but keep moving that forward. There is a line somewhere, and it is not unchristian to say what you believe that line is. We do that all the time, even though I suspect people like Madison would just, get on their fainting couch about this in areas other than religion. There's a point at which you're no longer a libertarian to do something more in the political sphere. And I know people will love to fallaciously use the no true Scotsman fallacy. But what that is making determinative characteristics that really have nothing to do with the topic and discussion. But I can tell you who's not a true Scotsman. Someone who wasn't born in Scotland, has no ties to Scotland, has never lived there or any relatives there. I think you can definitely say they are not a true Scotsman. And there comes a point where someone is not, in fact, a Christian. Now, is that line between what Girl Defined believes and God is Gray believes? No, I don't think so. But I don't deny the right of Girl Defined to disagree, because I'm not gatekeeping agreement like you are. Oh, this just is so irritating. I do think that they didn't do right by God is Gray, but it isn't because they disagreed with her to the point that they thought she wasn't a Christian. In the fundamentalist worldview, she would not be a Christian. In the fundamentalist worldview, I bet you Girl Defined doesn't think I'm a Christian, and I don't care. That's their right. Don't need people to need the smelling salts over that. What they did wrong is they agreed to a civil private conversation with her, or even one on their channels in which they discussed their differences, and they begged it off as being too busy and then still took pot shots at her at a conference. That was more catty mean girl stuff rather than gatekeeping Christianity. That is just ridiculous virtue signaling, frickin' nonsense. But
on their website, in the We Want to Meet You video, where Bethany and Kristen are advertising their conferences, when they describe their ticket options, there are just so many different types of ticketing options.
You'll have several ticket options. You can purchase an individual ticket for streaming just one, or a small group ticket for like maybe up to 10, or a large group ticket, which is like as many friends as you want to watch the conference with together, and a VIP ticket. There's a lot of details.
I just didn't know that worshiping God required a special VIP package.
Meow. Okay, you're just being catty now, Madison. Can we talk? Can we talk? You're just being catty. Having multiple ticketing options is not unusual for a conference. Are you gatekeeping Christianity where you think that you didn't think that worshiping God required a conference ticket? Did they say that? No, going to their conference does. You can worship God for free in other ways. This is a training conference. That was just a completely bitchy comment. And I don't even like what Girl Defined is doing or those types of conferences. When I was a Christian and there was those tea and crumpet women's conferences, I would rather eat my own foot out of a bear trap than go to one of them. But this is not something to pick on. This is trifling bullshit.
In 2021, Girl Defined also announced that their sisterhood anthem would be sung at the conference.
We are the sisterhood, calling all our friends to...
Was cleaning out my childhood room and found this gem from the first ever Girl Defined conference. Girl Defined Conference, discovering God's design for beauty, femininity, and identity. Timeless truth, gender matters. God created all of us to be female for a reason, and it's a beautiful thing. Purity is valuable to God. God values purity because it's for our good and His glory. In my opinion, after seeing all of this, Girl Defined wasn't just perpetuating purity culture, but was capitalizing off of the purity grift.
Is being a teacher of something you believe in grift? I'm beginning to really despise that term because it's come to believe people making money off of things you don't agree with. But if someone was doing the exact same thing for something you agree with, you wouldn't have a problem with it. And I actually looked up the word grift because I wanted a clear, because I use it in that loose, kind of catty, insulting way as well. But really, there's got to be an element of fraud in some way, or really gross exploitation, and I don't think this was going on here. You were dealing with young women who were teaching something that they were passionate about to willing participants, or she's going to get into, there could have been a lot of young girls there whose parents sent them, but parents have the right to educate their children. It was willing attendance, or the parents were having their children attend. This is not a grift. And that type of workbook, boy, did that give me flashbacks. And because she's going to make a point later on that we'll deal with, and maybe we'll just deal with it now, and I'll refer back to this, where she'd be like, these were obviously only targeted towards teenagers because there was homework. Tell me you know nothing about church life without telling me you know nothing about church life. A lot of churches, you're handed little sheets like that when you walk in for Sunday service and you're expected to fill it out during the sermon. I found it cringe. I never did it. But this is super, super typical Christian fare. I was a speaker at a weekend retreat, and it's for women, not for teenagers, called Via de Cristo. I gave talks that they called Royos. I gave the ideal Royo, and I gave the leader Royo. And there was an outline of points you had to cover in your talks while the rest got filled in with your personal details. But one of the things that had to be a part of your talk is, the name of my talk is Leaders, Leaders. Write that down. I mean, yeah, I do think it's kind of childish, but it is really, really typical in Christian circles, and that particular type of Christian circle. This is not a grift. That is them using what they believe to be their talents for the glory of God. Whether you agree or not doesn't make it a grift. This seems like a typical young woman's conference. I had gone to a couple before. I was like, yeah, not again. Not unusual.
Girl Defined have created an 8-week mentorship course where they look to provide members with personal discipline. Members will receive downloadable homework to help them dig deeper into each topic. Again, the word homework comes up. So, what age demographic do you think this course is aimed towards?
But really, we are passionate about mentoring younger women. Yeah. So we are so pumped because we have, for the first time ever, an online mentorship course. Yeah. It's an 8-week course that anyone can sign up for. It doesn't matter where you live. Like a small sisterhood with these live videos each week and these like videos you watch. I mean, it's really awesome. And we're going to take a group of people through it for 8 weeks. I'm so pumped about it.
Because no grown woman or person, at least that I know of, is going to take a course with the word homework in it.
I just dealt with that. You know nothing, Jon Snow. Sorry, you just don't know what the hell you're talking about. And even in other movements I've been involved with, even in the Libertarian movement, actually, Libertarians are autistically geeky enough that we would probably salivate at the word homework. Way to import your personal prejudices and life experiences and universalize them to everybody. That is just so off base, it's not even funny. Though I think it's doubtless that their course is geared towards young women because those are the people who most likely that this would be relevant to.
55.6% of their operating costs are their salaries, and even most churches have that under 20%. When they mysteriously needed the $20,000 because of Cody Ko's video, they already had $92,000 in the bank. Of course, other nonprofits ask for donations, but usually it's for necessities like supplies, and people have a clear picture and idea of where their donations and their money is going. But when Girl Defined's biggest expense is on meals for themselves, and more than 50% of the money from their ministry is going into their own pocket, where is this money going? It's all very shady and convoluted, and there's really not a necessity for these donations because it doesn't seem like a lot of actual charity work is being done here.
I'm not an expert on religious charities, but I don't think Madison is either. I don't know if those numbers are in line or out of line, but I know you're dealing with a 2-person ministry. That is their full-time job. When you're dealing with a church, they have a lot of other expenses and raise a whole lot more money so that I could see salaries would be under 20%. I don't know if that percentage for a 2-person ministry, maybe they have a little bit of staff, is in fact unusual. But the charitable work is the teaching that they do, and they would have travel and food and other things that are properly attributed to that. I, again, just think you're completely off base here. And if people want to give to it, they can. Whether they've reported properly under the law, I don't know. I don't know if any of their donors feel ripped off. I cannot say whether any donations were necessary or not. I don't think nonprofits have to exist in a state of poverty, but it seems a lot of this stems from Madison's conception of what she thinks is charitable work, and she doesn't believe what they do is. She's viewing it very narrowly, like feeding the hungry, housing the homeless, that sort of thing. But charitable work is not defined that narrowly. Again, I think she's really stretching to pick on them. Again, there might be reporting anomalies. I don't know. To be honest with you, on things like this, because I don't believe in taxation whatsoever, and I'm coming at this from my libertarian bent. Unless they outright defrauded people, I don't care. But even if I did and was like a real stickler for the law, I just don't see anything, again, with my limited knowledge, that jumps out at me. It seems like Madison doesn't like their work, so she's determining that none of it is charitable work. But when it comes to Christian ministry, their preaching and their teaching is the charity. Agree with it or not, that is what it is.
I mean, what is the charity work here? Genuinely, what is the charity work? The charity work is keeping teenage girls as virgins. That's the only thing they're doing here that in their minds would be considered charity work. Most of their ministry's sole focus is centered around the idea of keeping young girls pure and helping single girls find Christian husbands, which, in my opinion, is not a cause in need of $30,000 donations.
I feel like playing that Reason Magazine video here. Then don't give to it. But you don't get to say what other people think is worthy efforts. And again, that is typical Christian, conservative Christian beliefs and goals for their young women. You just don't agree with it, so then are you gatekeeping? I think you might be gatekeeping charity, Madison. I thought gatekeeping was bad.
Like Bethany and Kristen, there are people that are dying.
There's people that are dying.
And the obvious concern, troll, is obvious. Madison, what you're doing, don't you realize there's people dying in the world? And you're doing these pretty sets that you talk about later about how you're going to be doing more work on your sets, and that very gorgeous outfit you're wearing and all that makeup, you realize, and I'm not saying you wear too much makeup, I'm actually trying to compliment you and probably doing it very poorly, but that money that you spent on that and the time that you're spending on this, don't you realize there are people dying? Do you want people to die, Madison?
These cuts are blood money. People will die. Let's be very clear. Senate Republicans are paying for tax cuts for the wealthy with American lives.
People need kidneys, it's sad but decreed, yet the senator's hoarding one more than she needs. I offer this bill and I hope you'll vote aye, unless of course you just want people to die.
Normally, I would never dive into someone's personal dating life, at least to the extent that we're about to.
That's kind of equal to a big butt. And as Nedard Stark said, everything before the butt is bullshit. And yeah, it's true that Bethany made her personal life public. True. And then a lot of people say, and I think this is a judgment call, I really do, well, you've made it public, then it's fair game. And I don't think that's entirely untrue. I think, you know, wisdom is the better part of valor here, and I don't think it's valorous here. I don't think she needed to go there. I think it was kind of gross that she went there, and I do think it was indiscreet for Bethany to be sharing this publicly as well. But maybe I'm sensitive to this, and I'll completely admit this, because I tend to be an oversharer. But there are some things that are my story to tell and not necessarily other people's story to comment on. And yeah, there is a line, and it's hard to know where that is. But my gut tells me it was crossed here, and you didn't need to do this. This was gross, particularly when you start mentioning Kristen's totally inappropriate comments. Kristen's comments about her unhappiness with her adopted son. This is going to come up, but it was just things that if you don't want your children to read them later, don't put them on the internet. But that also means maybe, Madison, you should have forego that little bit of click not to comment on it. And then I know people could say, and you're commenting on it, so you're perpetuating it. So that's probably a fair critique, and I might be just as bad. Lord frickin' knows I'm not perfect. But I don't think we needed to go here at all. And I do have a couple clips on it, but not as much time as was spent by Madison on this.
Because keep in mind, when this chapter starts off, Bethany is still single. Kristen, on the other hand, is kind of seen as the superior sister who's been married off, found love, and, you know, probably consummated the marriage.
Another really catty comment. So yeah, no, things do get really sad here. And I, for once, am not going to overshare. But in between my two marriages, and I'm in an excellent marriage now, I struggled with a lot of this, where as an adult and newly divorced and dating and saying, well, you know, I was fixed in this mindset that you do not have sex outside of marriage. Try dating as a 40-something-year-old and saying, oh, we got to get married. And like, listen, I've been through this. I've been damaged by this, but also have great sympathy for the girl-defined point of view. But I feel very, very sad for Bethany. So she was basically raised with the expectation if she does everything right, and it looks like she did, she would find the Prince Charming that would make her happy forever. And I feel bad for her husband, too, to have these expectations put on him. And I think he was raised in a similar environment because she didn't get married till she was about 30, I think late 20s. And they didn't click right away. They weren't necessarily compatible. They had a lot of problems, and all of this was done in public because that's the public life they had. And it's actually quite sad. But in some ways, where Madison criticizes Bethany, I actually applaud her for trying to deal with it in a positive way and bring this issue to light. Because I can tell you, amongst Christian women in this environment, this stuff is not talked about. If it doesn't work out for you in the Prince Charming way it's supposed to, and you just don't click right away and like be completely physically compatible and satisfied, you just don't talk about that. I don't think Madison realizes the incredible bravery that Bethany showed for talking about it. You might not like every way she dealt with it, but to not just suffer in silence, she broke the mold here, and you're not giving her credit for it. My heart really, really goes out to Bethany. I don't think this was the path in life that was actually best for her, but it's her life and not mine to say.
And remember what the siblings said about Heidi Baird. They were raised to be married off to men that my mother approved of. They were essentially turned into mini versions of my mom. Imagine receiving so much pressure at a young age to adhere to a perfect standard, to become exactly like your mother and be a pawn in your mother's game. Even on Heidi's Instagram, there are certain children on there that she will post very frequently. And there are certain children who will show up on Heidi Baird's Instagram rarely, and some children who do not show up on her Instagram at all.
How is that appropriate for you to be commenting on? I'm asking you really seriously. And you edited this, well, your editor did, maybe, if it wasn't you. Hopefully you watched it before you got posted, and you thought that was okay to be. Maybe the children asked not to be. Maybe there are strained relationships. This is too intimate. You shouldn't have went there.
But In my opinion, in purity culture, there's nothing more valuable than a young, white, sheltered woman. Once you've matured, are married off, and have children, you no longer have any value.
Prove the white thing. I can tell you when I was in heavy midst of my evangelical, fundamentalist, purity culture type world, my two closest female friends, or at least two of my closest, I'm trying to think of the whole friend group then. One was a super devout black woman, and the other was super devout of Indian, not American Indian, not Native American, but India heritage. Where'd you get this? This is that virtue signaling wokeism that I mentioned earlier. The signs of the time. You could have, that statement could have been perfectly correct if you just omitted the white thing. You know, and there's purity culture in other religions, and some of which are, and it might not even be religious, it might be cultural, that just happens to have a particular religion. I'm not an expert on other religions, not trying to throw shade on other religions, but in some African countries where they're mostly Muslim, whether it's cultural, whether it's religious, not even going to get into that, they practice FGM to keep their women pure. Now, come on, girl, child, please. So, come on, girl. Why do you gotta be that way? What's wrong with you?
That's great. This was an attempt to try and sell the course, stating that in the past, before they had educated themselves on sex, they were only getting the bare crumbs. But now their life is so much better. So you should buy their course so that you have a better sex life as well. The thing is, this goes against all of the Christian teachings that Bethany had been peddling before. The idea that if you stay pure and wait till marriage, you'll have a fulfilling life, fulfilling marriage and sex life, that everything's going to be good. If now Bethany's saying that you need to educate yourself and you need a sex course, then that goes against all of that doctrine. Throughout Bethany and Dave's marriage, there's been a continual flip-flop of Bethany trying to portray the perfect marriage life and then openly talking about her and Dave's struggles in their marriage. You can't have your cake and eat it too.
So Bethany, in her eyes, is damned if she does and damned if she doesn't. So Bethany is breaking out of the mold. She is saying the truth that doing all of those things might not be enough, and you might need some additional tips. And for her, I think she does go on to say, though I might not have clipped it, about how utterly unqualified Bethany is. I don't know, the life experience of following all the rules and then not having a satisfying marriage. But oh my God, how embarrassing this must be for her husband. That does give her some experience. They're still married, and I hope sincerely that they're happy. But she is doing a corrective, and you should be potentially applauding that, even while critiquing maybe some of the ways that you don't like how she's doing it. Because Bethany basically has gone into the very extreme, like, salesmanship of passive income, and I shit you not. In a way, this is like just epic. Like, in a way, you just have to admire it, but you know, Girl Defined sold a lot of courses. You want to know what Bethany started making money doing? Courses on how to sell courses. She sold a course on how to sell courses. I mean, I can't even hate it. Like, that is... that's like, let's form a committee to do the thing.
Bethany claims that she can help you create your own profitable online course business, suggesting that your financial situation can change in merely 6 months. If you start your own profitable course, you can change your future, she claims. So Bethany's other courses would range from $250 to $150. How much is this course? The low price of $2,400. Wait, no. $1,900. And of course, as you can see on the website, the price is pretty much perpetually marked down.
Yeah, so she has a course on how to make courses. Now, actually selling online courses, I actually don't think is a bad thing if it's something that you know. I'm going to say it's something I'd even considered before. I just am on to my next thing to be too busy to sit down and write on how to teach people to do other things. And I tend to give things away. I've been asked on how to be a secretary of a Libertarian political party, and I'm probably just going to do a bunch of videos on how to do that and give that away. But if I were smart, I would like have some kind of subscription program, but I guess I'm just not as smart. But I actually don't have a problem with that. But yeah, selling the courses on how to make courses is for that amount of money. Yeah, that is something. But the marketing trick of having a higher price and having it perpetually marked down, yeah, I don't like that. But it's not uncommon, and it certainly isn't unique to Bethany. And again, I'm not sure if I clipped this out, but and we'll find out because I've only got 3 clips left. But in the main video, it says that lower price is only if you pay it all at once. If you pay it in installments, which is certainly more affordable to people, you pay the full price. That's also, I actually don't have an issue with that. And that kind of mitigates against the fact that it really isn't the higher price and it's just perpetually marked down as kind of a trickery, because it actually is the higher price if you don't pay all at once. There are plenty of online products that I use that if you buy a year's worth, you get it at a discount. I'm looking, speaking of courses, but this isn't really for a course, it's for professional services I offer. I'm a registered parliamentarian, if you did not know. And I want to launch my website for that side business and thinking of using WordPress engine. And it's cheaper if you buy a year's worth of server fees rather than pay by the month. So that's not a terribly unusual and I don't think unethical business model.
On the website, it also says you have the option of a one-time payment of $1,900, or you can make 6 monthly payments of $400, which is definitely more realistic for most households to be able to spread out the payments over 6 installments. But the thing is, although Bethany's website claims that the course sells at a reduced price of $1,900, that only applies if you choose the one-time payment. If customers can't pay the one-time payment and you can only pay the $400 over the period of 6 months, that will equate to the original price of $2,400, which was done very strategically, knowing that most customers won't be able to pay all at once and will likely have to choose the $400 over a period of 6 payments option. Personally, I feel like that's a really deceptive tactic. If customers choose the more financially comfortable option of $400 over 6 payments, the price goes up from $1,900 to $2,400, which is over a 25% increase in price.
I should perhaps find some examples of this being really, really common. I have to wonder how sheltered you are, Madison, if you have not encountered this. Now, you might think it's just a bad business practice for everyone, but people default on payments. To offer a premium if you pay all at once, just like some businesses now offer a premium if you pay in cash so they don't have to pay credit card fees. I don't know. That's common. You can think it's unethical. I don't. I actually think that's decent business practice, even though this business model of selling courses to make courses is certainly very hinky to me.
Becoming your own online course business owner is your ticket out. That feels predatory to say. You have to take this course because it's your ticket out. You have to pay $2,000 to have more money in life.
She didn't say that though. And all kinds of marketing ploys are exploitative to a degree. I mean, that's how marketing works, but it doesn't say it's your only ticket out. It's not like MLMs. It might be a ticket out for some people, but I don't think it's as bad as you're claiming it is. She's marketing it to people and saying it's a way to get passive income. Is it overhyped as a ticket out? Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen for very many people. And in that respect, that would be similar to MLMs, in which such a small fraction of people actually make money. So I'll say you have some points and don't have others, and it's a bit of a stretch. I think it's a pipe dream. I definitely do. But it could be a way for a side income if you actually know how to do something. There are plenty of people who do that make money through courses. And I'm using the term probably a little broadly because it might be weekly newsletters or videos or things like that, whereas the courses are more something you do once and then it's literally passive income. But the other ones might what you be called pseudo passive, because as new people sign up, you still do push out your older content. I think you guys know what I'm saying, but I don't think it's quite as bad as she's representing. Now we're on our last clip and we'll wrap up.
But the sad thing is, Bethany, when given the opportunity to grow, pushed herself more towards greed and exploiting her own audience, and less towards finding herself and her own autonomy. But there's still time. And maybe because of their past, we can be a little bit kinder and more gracious towards Bethany and Kristen and the Mershon and Baird family, besides Heidi.
You seem to have a hate boner for Heidi. Okay, but you weren't particularly gracious in this video. And I actually think Bethany found a lot more of her autonomy and voice than you are giving her credit for. She just didn't become what you think is the ideal. And I think perhaps I'm asking you, Madison, does that say more about you than about Bethany? Maybe she will find other ways that will make her happy. But from what I've seen, she's found her own way, and it's not a way I would have chosen, but it's her life and her choices, and she seems like she has a head on her shoulder that she can find her way out of this, what you and I would agree is a box, if she really doesn't want to be in it. Okay, that's it. And I'm sure some of what I said didn't make some people happy because she's a very popular, very sweet creator. But I do think it needed to be said. I ask you, if this was the only show of mine you watch, that you stick around. If you even remotely care for political content, you can tell I'm not the typical commentator. And if you'd like a perspective that you're not going to hear that much, because again, I am the National Secretary of the Libertarian Party. None of this had anything to do with the Libertarian Party, was not the opinion, official or otherwise, of the Libertarian Party. But just to give you a little bit of my background, if you like to hear things from a perspective that is the hardcore Libertarian perspective you might not hear all of the time, I would really appreciate you sticking around. Otherwise, have an awesome night and live free. Mi guapas de libertad.
Take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business.